The multipolar world is here, and Washington is terrified. Let's be honest, something historic is happening, something irreversible. The world is shifting, the center of gravity is moving, and for the first time in decades, the United States isn't holding the steering wheel. We are witnessing the birth of a multipolar world, and while that should be good news for humanity, in Washington, it's treated like the end of days. For almost 30 years after the fall of the Soviet Union, America crowned itself the sole superpower. It wasn't just confidence, it was doctrine. We won the Cold War, they said. History is over, they said. We're in charge now. Except, that world never actually existed. And today, it's impossible to pretend anymore. Not because the US collapsed, but because everyone else rose. China surged, Russia reasserted, India transformed, technology decentralized, nuclear deterrence spread, economic power diversified. And suddenly the unipolar world became a nostalgic dream, one only believed by Washington speechwriters and aging think tank dinosaurs. For the rest of the planet, this is balance, this is safety, this is long overdue. Because multipolarity, if handled with wisdom, could make the world more stable than ever before. But the problem is simple: some people refuse to accept reality, and that refusal is now the greatest danger facing humanity. 4 powers. 1 new reality. Whether Washington accepts it or not, the world now has 4 major powers: the United States, China, Russia, India, all nuclear, all technologically advanced, all dynamic, and none can defeat another without destroying the world in the process. This isn't the 1950s. You can't bully rising giants. You can't dictate to nuclear economies. The world is too interconnected, the talent is too widespread, the capability is everywhere. This is good news for the world, but it's terrible news for any empire trying to cling to a fading primacy. Because the harder you grip a crumbling world order, the faster it slips through your fingers. How Washington's denial creates war. Let's talk about the uncomfortable truth. Washington is the most destabilizing force in the world today. Not because it's evil, not because it's doomed, but because it's desperately trying to preserve a dominance it can no longer maintain. And the consequences are catastrophic. Look at Ukraine. A war that should never have happened became inevitable when the US refused to respect even basic geopolitical sanity. Russia warned repeatedly, "Do not push NATO to our border. Do not place missiles on our doorstep." Washington replied, "It's none of your business, except it is their business. You don't need to like Russia to understand that a nation with a 2,100-kilometer border with Ukraine might be concerned about NATO tanks rolling in." The first rule of great power diplomacy is simple: leave space, leave time, leave caution. But America treated nuclear geopolitics like a backyard dispute, as if proximity didn't matter, as if history didn't matter, as if borders were optional. And so, escalation became inevitable. This wasn't just miscalculation, it was arrogance. The kind of arrogance that can start nuclear wars. The same playbook is unfolding in Taiwan. Washington says it's defending Taiwan, but shipping missiles to a flashpoint region isn't protection, it's provocation. Real protection would sound like this: we recognize the one China reality, and we urge both sides to solve their differences peacefully. Instead, we get theatrics, weapon shipments, political posturing, claims of standing with Taiwan while turning the island into a battlefield in waiting. This isn't leadership. It's gasoline poured onto a slow burn conflict. Because history shows something simple: peace collapses fastest when outsiders interfere. Spheres of security, not spheres of empire. If we want a stable multipolar world, the rules must be crystal clear. 1. Great powers must stay out of each other's neighborhoods. No NATO bases on Russia's border. No US military posturing on China's doorstep. No Russian bases in Mexico. No Chinese bases in Cuba. This isn't imperialism, it's survival. Call it spheres of security, not spheres of influence. Security. Because when nuclear powers touch noses, accidents turn into wars. 2. Great powers must respect smaller neighbors. A big country has no right to manipulate the internal affairs of smaller states. Not with coups, not with bribes, not with military intimidation. The US learned this the hard way. For decades under the Roosevelt corollary, Washington treated Latin America as a playground. If a country tried land reform, if a corporation demanded help, the Marines arrived. Guatemala learned that in 1954, when a president was overthrown, not for a threat, but for land reform that bothered an American fruit company. History is full of these scars, but Franklin Roosevelt changed everything with the good neighbor policy. No invasions, no coups, no interference. And guess what happened? Peace, stability, growth. Imagine if the world followed that model. Imagine if great powers acted like good neighbors. That's the future we could have, but it's not the future we're choosing. A world on the edge. Because instead of diplomacy, we get brinkmanship. Instead of prudence, we get provocation. And instead of leadership, we get chaos. You think Washington is prepared for a multipolar world? Right now, the US is floating a naval task force near Venezuela, sinking boats, escalating tensions, and openly discussing intervention. Why? Oil. Venezuela has the largest proven reserves on Earth, bigger than Saudi Arabia, bigger than anywhere, and in a world where climate regulations threaten profits, oil giants want new frontiers, even if it means another war. And that brings us to the next crisis. While great powers argue, while politicians chase headlines, while fossil fuel lobbyists write policy, the planet quietly crosses irreversible tipping points. We've already breached 1.5 °C warming. We're on track for 2 °C by mid-century. Category 5 hurricanes are now annual. Coral reefs are collapsing. Rainforests are dying. Microplastics are everywhere. These aren't future problems. They're happening right now. But solving them requires something we don't have. Global cooperation. Rainforests cross borders. Oceans connect continents. Carbon emissions don't need visas. One country can't fix it, but one country can block progress. And right now, the greatest obstacle isn't ignorance, it's corruption. The fossil fuel lobby controls major parties in the US, Canada, Australia, Russia, the Gulf, everywhere. Politicians call climate change a hoax, not because they believe it, but because they're paid to. Climate warning becomes political theater, and survival becomes optional. We're entering the most dangerous era in human history. Nuclear weapons, cyber warfare, space militarization, bioengineering, AI arms races, climate collapse, resource wars. One mistake, one accident, one miscalculation could change everything. COVID showed us how fragile the world can be. Advanced bioresearch has moved faster than regulation. And whether the virus escaped from a lab or natural spillover, one thing is clear. We are playing with fire we don't know how to control. A multipolar world requires restraint. But the world today is run by leaders addicted to confrontation. We don't need showmen. We don't need empire nostalgia. We don't need war fever. We need adults in the room. The next decade isn't just a test of diplomacy. It isn't just a contest of power. It's a survival exam for civilization. Can great powers respect boundaries? Can politicians resist fossil fuel corruption? Can countries cooperate across borders? Can the world accept multipolar reality? Because if not, we aren't heading toward conflict. We're heading toward catastrophe. Multipolarity isn't a threat. It's an opportunity, maybe the last one we get, to build a world based on balance, respect, and shared responsibility. But only if we act wisely. Only if we act now. If you believe the world needs honest analysis, if you want more deep-dive geopolitical breakdowns, if you think these conversations matter, hit like, tap subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. The discussion doesn't end here. It starts here.